In this video, I'm going to show you how a seaside pub in the UK goes from good to great and how an already well-performing business adds an additional £70,000 of profit each year to the bottom line and an additional £350,000 of enterprise value should the owners look to sell the business. I'm going to break down the raw numbers from where it was to where it is and the steps that were taken to get there. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at, obviously, when we start looking at the performance of a business is how much money is coming through the till. Not even how much money is coming through the till, what are the net sales of the business? So the sales of the business after VAT and after service charge has been taken out. We don't want to be looking at artificially inflated numbers. We always, for the sake of analysing your business and where it is now, need to start with the net sales number. So after VAT, after service charge. For this business, which was, just a reminder, a seaside gastro pub. The owners had run it for coming up on 10 years and they'd taken it from basically nothing to where it is now, doing a phenomenal job, but there was always a bit more that they thought they could get out of it. So this business is doing just over £1.2 million in sales. Now, that is pretty good, right? And because it's a seaside coastal town, there is definitely some peaks and troughs, okay? The winter months are a bit leaner, although still really strong revenues, but obviously the summer months, July and August, is where the big revenue peaks hit, and actually where 90% of the profit in this business was generated in July and August. So bear that in mind. Okay. The next thing we want to look at after we look at net sales is, once we take into account our food and drink costs, what do we keep? What's left? So that's our gross profit. For this business, it was 67%. Now, I'm going to get into a breakdown of what that was between the bar and the kitchen. That revenue was split pretty much 50-50 between the bar and the kitchen, but the GPs were slightly different. And that was one of the biggest things that you're going to tackle. And always the first place that we recommend, if you're an independent hospitality owner and you're looking to make more money in your business, your GP is the first place you should start. But 67%, I think if you ask most pub owners these days, they'd go, yeah, 67, that sounds pretty good. I'd be pretty happy with that. Their labour, again, pretty good for 2026. We record this in May 2026. The days of 30% labour costs for a single site independent hospitality business in the UK are gone, right? Sayonara, goodbye, gone. This business is at 36%, heavily focused on service and staffing. And so 36% is actually, again, a pretty good performance. And then other costs, stuff like rent, repairs, maintenance, electricity, gas, all of those other costs, ancillary costs that go into the business, they came to 23%. Now, if you're under 30% of your other costs of the business, you've got a real opportunity to make money. Where your other costs are over 30% of your net revenue for the business, chances are you probably need to push your revenue a bit more, because it's going to be very difficult with how tough trading is right now with cost of goods and cost of staff to really deliver strong profitability if your other costs are above 30%. So these guys below that, 23%, so plenty of room to make money in this business. And as I alluded to, they are making money in the business. Again, if you asked most pub owners in the UK in 2026, would they be happy with an 8% operating profit? I think they'd bite your hand off for it. Okay, there's 3 hospitality closures per day in the UK in 2026 so far, in Q1 2026. So most operators would bite your hand off for an 8% operating profit. But the guys that run this place, as I said, they built it from the ground up. And when you take 2 directors' salaries, you take corporation tax out of that 100 grand of cash profit that was sitting in the business, there's not a huge amount left over to play with, right? And certainly not for pay rises or paying yourself more or going on some more holidays. And actually what the guys who run this business wanted was options and flexibility to make more money in the business, to pay themselves more if they decided to, but also with a view to potentially selling the business on one day. How can we maximize the value that we get, not just between now and selling it on, but at the time when we come to sell it on, how can we make it more of a valuable asset that someone would like to buy? And if you're an independent hospitality owner and you're thinking of selling your business one day, stick around to the end of this video, because we're going to show you the difference it makes to the enterprise value of your business just by making the changes that we're going to talk about to increase that bottom line profitability. Okay, so now let's look at what this new world of the business looks like, right? Starting again with net sales. This business actually had room to grow their sales, although 1.25 million is a decent number. There's actually room to grow that sales number, and it comes down to understanding what goes into a sales number. And so your net sales is determined by how many people buy in the business. So the number of covers or the number of transactions, and what they spend, the average spend that they make each time that they do it. Okay, they're the only two things you need to grow or that dictate what your net sales is going to be. How many people, how much they spend. Okay, and this business for the past 2 years have been constantly growing and growing how many people came into the business, but how much they were spending had actually been on the decline. And so they were working really hard and doing a great job to get loads more people into the business, but the money, they weren't squeezing as much money out of everybody that came through. And so actually purely looking at the pricing, the structure and the menus, and using some menu psychology to integrate price anchors into the menu to level up people's expectation of what they would be paying in the pub, to bring cocktails to the front of the food menu, to bring drinks pairings with certain dishes. All of these things that can be implemented to drive that average spend, so that even if the number of people coming through the door flattens off, growing that average spend by 5% will result in a 5% growth in the business. And that's what is happening here. And so no matter where you are, there's always those two levers that you can pull: more people spending more. And we would say the spending more is always the first and easiest lever, and the one that's in your control for you to pull. If we look at gross profit, so again, previously was 67%, and where we want to get it to is 71%. Now that looks like a big jump, and I said I will break this down for you in more detail. So what it looks like from a bar and a kitchen GP point of view, the 67% is made up of a 66% GP from the bar and a 68% GP from the kitchen. Again, most people would look at this and think, yeah, do you know what, that's fine, I'll be pretty happy with that. But we've seen countless amounts of P&Ls of people that are doing things brilliantly, and we know there's more in this when you get all the right ingredients in place to make the cash really land in your bank account. So starting off with the bar GP, we've been landing at 66%. When we talked to this client, they'd always aimed for a 70% bar GP. And they were really frustrated every month when it came in pretty much religiously around 65-66%. You might have felt this yourself. And all of these stock trackers and everything, they felt like there was always a disconnect between the stock trackers and what we should be getting versus what we are getting. And actually, when we came into this and we stripped it back, when we hear that, we think, is it an execution problem or is it a foundational problem? And so what I mean by that is the GP problem foundational? I.e., what you pay for a product and what you sell the product out for, and how much of that product you sell, if you mix it all together, what should your GP be? Okay, and so when we ran those numbers with current cost prices, current pricing, current mix of sales on their bar, actually their current GP should have been around 67-68%. And so that makes sense. Actually, it's not an execution problem. We're never going to hit 70% GP because we, the owners, have set the business up to hit a 67-68% GP because of the cost prices and because of the pricing. Okay, and so the work that goes into this then from their point of view was identifying the big categories where those changes need to happen. One biggest one was on draft, and so there was a complete relook at draft suppliers, beers, everything to keep their independent spirit, but with the right trackers laid out so they could go to the suppliers and say, look, this is the cost price we need, this is what we want to sell it for, this is how much of it we sell, and these are the prices that we need to hit the GP that we want. And it's amazing when you give suppliers, and the same happened with their wine, rather than just saying, oh, this is a nice wine, I'm going to charge X, Y, Z, they actually understood, if I want to charge £24 for this wine, and I sell 50% of it in bottles, 25% of it in 250s, 25% of it in 175s, what does the cost price of that bottle need to be for me to make 72% GP? And so what you'll often find when you talk to suppliers is they'll just give you good options. Oh, it's a good price, you could sell it for this, you could sell it for that. Whereas actually, if you can get the best out of your suppliers by spoon feeding them the cost prices that you want and the quality that you want to match it. And so if you know you want to charge £28 for a wine and you know it needs to be a cost price of £6.20, that's information that you can give your supplier, and you can challenge them on giving you the best possible wine at that price point to hit where you want to go. We did that due diligence massively across all wine, all draft, to get to a place where the theoretical GP on the bar should be 71%. And so with a couple of points of slippage with wastage and all of that good stuff, coming out at 69% is totally reasonable. And it makes a massive difference, just that jump from 66 to 69. And it didn't take anything from the team. It was all done in the back office and negotiations with suppliers and lineups of products. And so all of this stuff, when we talk about GP, it's so in your control. You can have it done and executed in 1, 2, 3 months, depending how detailed you want to get into it. The kitchen for us was the biggest one where there was a big disconnect. Okay, 68% GP in a kitchen on a gastropub. Your kitchen GP needs to be delivering at least 72% plus. Okay, and so usually that comes down to, if you're not hitting that, usually it comes down to a few issues. One, your recipes. Are they costed properly? Are they accurate? What are your portion sizes like? What are your wastage? What is your pricing? And what is your stock control? Okay, and so where we always start on that is recipes. Are recipes up to date? Are dishes costed accurately? Are they costed using the latest ingredient costs? Okay, and if we have those things, which we went through with this business, and we got to a point where actually based on current ingredient costs, current price, the price that we want to charge, how much goes on the plate, we should be hitting a 78 to 80% GP on this food. So from 78% to 68% is a massive drop off. And so the things that you then need to drill into are the portioning. Is what's on the recipe card realistic for what actually goes out, and putting a process in place so the portions are consistent every single time, no matter who's in the kitchen. Wastage and stock control. And that turned out to be a big problem in this business, where the chefs had carte blanche to order what they want, and the stock holding was far too high. Ordering was based on gut feel, and anytime the owners tried to talk to the chefs, it was always fobbed off and they were given some roundabout answers. So if you are an owner and you find yourself having difficulty communicating with your chef about what's expected, the two key things you need to ask your chef when it comes to ordering is, what are the par levels for each of our ingredients? So based on whatever day of the week we're on and whatever our delivery day is, how much stock of a particular ingredient should we have? Because that dictates how much you order. And having that in place means it's not just in one person's head, it's not just a gut feel. And then alongside that, obviously, what do we currently have of each line? So regular stock checks. And you should have all of that completely transparent so that there is no hiding, and you can understand how much of your cash is being tied up in stock and it isn't going on the plate of the customer and ultimately isn't going into your bank account. And if you've not done that kind of exercise before and you've always left it to your head chef, and now sometimes a head chef will get it perfect and you'll have nothing to worry about. I'm talking specifically if you feel like your GP should be 75, 78% and it's at 65, 68%, this is an operational problem. It's not a costing problem, it's not a pricing problem. And so when that is the case, you need to get into the weeds with your chefs on the operations. And sometimes in that scenario, your chef will feel like you're babying them, like you're marking their homework, and they'd be right to feel that, because that is what you're doing and that is what your job is as an owner. And so that was the big piece of work that went into this kitchen that delivers a 73% GP. So from what should be 78 to 80, again, allowance for wastage, staff meals, discounts, freebies, all of that stuff, brings it down to a reasonable or very good 73%. And you can see that what looks insignificant, 67% to 71% GP, actually adds almost £100,000 of cash into the business. And so it's incredibly important. And the first thing you should always do is to get that GP number absolutely nailed. For this business, the next step was on labour. And the goal on this was purely just to keep the percentage the same. With all of the NI increases, minimum wage increases, there's a buffer to allow the cash budget to increase, but that the percentage would stay the same. And so not much needed to change here, just needed the right budgeting, forecasting, tracking, and making sure the managers were on board with basically keeping things flat with the year before and allowing for the extra costs. And the other costs, shouldn't be any other costs in the business this year. Same from a cash point of view, just means that other costs as a percentage, because we've increased sales, would decrease to 22%. What that would mean overall for the business, this big piece of work on GP and staying flat percentage-wise on labour, allowing a little bit for all the government increases, would mean from an 8% operating profit to a 13% operating profit. Now, you might sit there and go, Christ, all of that work just for that? All of that work for 5 measly percentage points? You can think of it like that, or you can think of it in the case of, that's taking that business from £100,000 to £170,000. So what is 5 percentage points on this business is a 70% increase in bottom line profit. That's massive. And so if you think about what that means tangibly, it means £70,000 extra each year added to the bottom line, okay? So a couple of decent pay rises for the owners and some emergency funds for the business as well. What is amazing though is if they ever wanted to sell this business, so when you look to sell a hospitality business, you will usually get a sale price as a baseline of 3 to 5 times your operating profit or EBITDA or owner adjusted earnings. In the old world, where they're making £100,000 of operating profit, they would have got between £300,000 and £500,000 for the sale of the business. Now, other stuff will have gone on top of that, the lease, the building, all of that other stuff, but just for the base business, £300,000 to £500,000. In this new world of £170,000 of operating profit, it's between £500,000 and £850,000. So what was your maximum opportunity to sell this business previously is now your minimum opportunity with those increases. And if you look at the 5 times multiple, which you will get for a very well run business with a very good brand, it's an extra £350,000 of enterprise value. If you take this as an example, if you run this business for 5 years and you get £70,000 extra each year, it's £350,000 extra in profit that you'll have got over those 5 years. And then you sell the business in year 6 and you get £350,000 extra enterprise value when you sell the business. These few changes that we make here to the details around GP and the foundations and the commercial structure add up to a potential £700,000 of extra cash in the business. And so what seems like insignificant small changes on 67% to 71% GP can multiply depending on what you want to do with the business. And if you are an independent hospitality owner and you currently run an independent hospitality business, the way you run that business will be heavily dictated by what type of person and what type of owner you are. And as I mentioned, myself and Frankie, we spend all day, every day working with independent owners. And what we've done is we've condensed over 100 hours of conversations with owners, and we've profiled those conversations, and they fit really nicely into 4 distinct types of owners that exist within independent hospitality. And the really interesting thing was, although everyone's business is totally unique, 80% of people fit into one type. And so if you want to find out what type of owner you are, and if you fit into that 80%, or if you're an outlier, there's a link in the description. Just answer 6 questions, probably takes about 40 seconds, and you'll get your owner type. But not only that, we want to make sure it's packed full of value, so it's our gift to you. Once you have your owner type, you'll also be given 3 things that you can work on next week when it comes to your GP, when it comes to your labor, when it comes to your numbers and planning, so that you can take where you are now and get focus to build the business that you want and take those next steps of where you want to be. So that's it. It's our free gift to you. Please use it. It's in the description. It'll be the first thing in the description. You won't be able to miss it. And yeah, we'll catch you on the other side.